Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the SaaS Founder Show. I'm Tony Zayas, joined by Andy Halko. Again, if you haven't joined us, this is the show where we sit down and talk with SaaS founders and hear all about that amazing journey. We've had some really incredible guests on so far this year. And I would like to introduce, just to kick it off, this week we're talking to Ray Blakney. He's the CEO and founder of Podcast Talk, a SaaS product that helps people get booked on podcasts. So really cool, and obviously an important need these days. Ray, how are you doing?
Doing well, Tony. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking the time. But I read the brief descriptor. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about Podcast Talk?
Yeah, so we'll start with the origin story of how podcasts came around. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. Background's a software engineer, but oddly enough, Podcast Talk was my first SaaS product. I've been in online business for 15 years. Never actually bothered with a SaaS product before. So the story is my other business. Its name is livelingua.com. We're one of the top 5 online language schools in the world, bootstrapped by my wife and I. So we're recording this kind of at the end of COVID. What happened was March 2019. Wow. It feels like a lot shorter than that in the last 2 years. When COVID hit, we were one of those people who were in the lucky position that our business took off even more, right? So we were big, but it grew 40% that month because everybody was stuck at home and suddenly they wanted to go online and learn Spanish, English, French, German. Might as well make the most of being stuck at home. And up until that point, we had primarily done our marketing through SEO, Facebook ads, and Google ads. I had been on a few podcasts in the past, but generally it's because I spoke at conferences and somebody invited me on because they saw me on stage or people I knew who had podcasts. But I wanted to get in front of a new audience. So I went out there. I'm like, okay, let's find some podcasts to get on. How hard could this be, right? So like everybody else, we go to the big G, Google, and I'm like, podcast to be a guest on. I Googled it. For anybody out there who's tried that absolutely does not work, right? You find podcasts there. They're either haven't produced episodes in the last few years, or you get like Joe Rogan. And while I'd love to be on Joe Rogan, probably he's not going to have me on anytime soon, right? Until I build a rocket to go to space, he's probably not going to have me on his show. So it was a waste of time. I spent a whole day and I maybe found 4 or 5 podcasts to pitch. So I said, okay, maybe there's got to be a better way. So I started looking for software out there to fix it, or maybe an agency that'll do it. So the agencies came to me and they're like, look, we'll charge you a few $100 or a few $1,000s a month to get you on like 5 shows. And I'm like, are these big shows with a lot of listeners? I'm like, no, we can't guarantee any of that. So you're telling me I'm going to pay you $1,000 and I might be on the show of some kid in his parents' basement who's like recording a podcast. And, they jokingly said, well, you never know, right? And I was like, no, I'm not going to be spending that much money. So being an entrepreneur and a business owner, I saw an opportunity. I'm like, look, can I do something better? And so that's how Podcast Talk was born. I'm like, look, can I get every podcast in the world into a database? I experimented for a few weeks. I'm like, yes, I can. I didn't finish it a few weeks, but I physically said I could get it. Let's see if we can get their contact information. Let's see if we can get their social media information. We're mixing in right now, SEO information like Ahrefs and all the rest of it. So you can actually use it as a SEO play. And right now we have it. So you can go in there and search in Podcast Talk, every podcast. Let's say you guys, Andy, you want to be on a show about marketing. You're like, give me every podcast in the world that has the word marketing in the description. Released an episode in the last 2 weeks, has at least a 4.5-star reviews, has at least a podcast score of 50, which is what our own internal ranking is of podcasts, and has the word pink flamingo in the title. Whatever, right? I mean, any of these, and it's in Swahili. We have all these little factors. I challenge anybody to go to Google and find those. And how long will it take you? The podcast will take you a few seconds, and then after that, we'll even do the email drip pitching for you. So first email, follow-up email, all the rest of it, all in our system. But we'll get into more details in a minute. But that's pretty much the origin story of Podcast Talk.
That's pretty awesome. I'm kind of curious when. It sounds like obviously you had a primary business that you were focused in and day out. For other folks that are other founders doing the same thing, when did this turn from a side project into a real thing for you? Or was it always from the beginning?
I think it was always from the beginning. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I owned a chocolate factory in Southeast Asia for 5 years while running a language school. So I've always actually had multiple businesses going at the same time. The way I do it, obviously, is I have a good team working at my primary business who kind of takes care of the day-to-day operations. So we're past the startup phase in that business, which allows me to do these other projects. This is my primary project. Podcast Talk is my primary project right now, right? So Live Lingua, I'm going for the level 10s meetings every week with the team and all the rest of it. But day to day, unless something explodes, I don't have to do very much over there. I know it's a privileged position to be in, to be there, but I've been at this for 15 years, so it was not an overnight success. I joked that my book would be called 7 Years to 7 Figures, and nobody would buy it because nobody wants to hear that, right?
Yeah, right. They want 7 minutes for 7.
Exactly.
You mentioned something, and our show is focused on talking to founders. You said level 10. And I think that's something to dig into, which we haven't ever on any other show. What's a level 10 and how do you use it?
Yeah, and I'll give all the credit to my COO for implementing this, because I'll be honest, for anybody who's read the book Traction out there, when there's the visionary and the integrator. Yeah, I'm definitely not the integrator, right? I mean, it's not me at all.
I hear ya.
Yeah. So about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I hired my COO over at LiveLingua, and she came in and looked at the business, and she's like, "How did you get so big being this disorganized?" Was pretty much her initial thing. Is like, "You guys have no systems in place." I'm like, "Look, I'll be honest. My background again is a computer engineer. I've never studied business. I winged it. I'm like, if somebody asked me for my business plan 10 years ago, I'm like, what? Well, what are you talking about, business plan? I'm like, I just made a website, and then I've tried to kind of figured out stuff as we went along. So she came in there, and I had read books on the EOS before, but it's called the Entrepreneur Operating System, is the management system that we have implemented in my company. We actually use another SaaS product, which we love, called 90.io, which helps you implement SaaS, implement EOS within your own company. And that is actually what we're using as our project management system at our leadership level. We use ClickUp for our kind of day-to-day project management, but for 90.io is what we use for the vision, mission, direction of our company. For companies that are starting out and are looking for kind of a little bit clear direction on what they're doing, I recommend implementing EOS, but generally wait till you're about, I'd say minimum 5 people, maybe 10 people on staff. Otherwise, you're wasting a whole lot of time with implementing a system. If you're 2 founders, what are you going to do with EOS? I mean, you don't need level 10 meetings. You should be on
yourself
Slack.
accountable every week.
Exactly. Or you should be talking every day. I mean, you guys are just starting the company out. You don't need this kind of thing. When you get to about 10 people,
room with 5 mirrors and just talk to yourself.
That's just my morning though for me, right? I'm like, come on, that's how I get my self-validation every morning. I'm just like talking to myself in the mirror, right? So EOS is a great system. It's worked out for us, especially somebody like me who, like a lot of entrepreneurs, the whole shiny object syndrome, I tend to fall into that quite a bit. And EOS kind of keeps me on track. We do the quarterly planning, the monthly planning, and the yearly planning, and we have a 3 and 5 year vision built into that. And it's flexible, but we kind of keep it up, and everybody on the goal has to keep up to that. Everybody on the team has to keep up to the goals. And the key there is that they set their own goals at the beginning of each quarter, and they have to hold themselves accountable. So it's not like me, the CEO, coming in and saying, cracking the whip all the time. We've already implemented that over at Podcast Hawk, because our team there is 9 people, and we have EOS implemented there as well.
Yeah, it's so funny. I probably say the term shiny key syndrome about myself weekly to people. So I hear what you're saying. There's a lot to unpack there. I'm kind of curious, how you mentioned the size for companies, but how important is it to look at these types of business methodologies when you're starting up and either trying to implement them yourself or finding someone else to help you implement them? I mean, EOS is one, but there's a lot out there that are really valuable and interesting. Do you take time to learn about those and incorporate them?
Yeah, well, we decided on EOS after taking a look at a lot of other systems out there, right? So this one we just decided was the best for us. And like everybody else, there's the strict EOS as described in the book, but then there's how you implement it in your own company. You take some parts of it, you take other parts, you leave other parts, and you mix them all in together. Let's talk about the phases, though. So if you're just starting off, I'd say don't worry about it, right? There are so many other things. I'm a big believer of if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you waited too long to launch, kind of that philosophy. And if you spend all day planning, okay, we need SOPs for everything. I'm like, no, you don't. You need a website out there to see if even one person buys your product before you put down your first SOP, because if nobody buys it, don't waste your time. No validation whatsoever. So worry about getting validated. If it's just you and one other founder, build your product, get some selling. So the ideal founder combination, of course, is the tech and the marketing, right? So there's go out there, sell, have one of them sells, the other one builds, and then let's see if anybody actually wants this. If you're a solo founder, which is what I've generally been in the past, you better learn a little bit of both of those things, because you're going to have to do both of those at the same time. If you're doing this as a side hustle, It's also going to take you a little bit longer to kind of get off the ground. That being said, while you're doing that, make sure you educate yourself about these systems so that when you are building the company, you start hiring more people, you have that in mind and you can start putting these systems in place at least gradually while you're building up the company. Otherwise, you end up in a position like me, where you have a company, LiveLink, had about 15 staff members and we had nothing in place. And then the CEO comes in and it's like, I was having one-on-one meetings with like every single staff person from like the customer support all the way up because I didn't know any better, right? And then nobody had goals. Only like 2 or 3 people had goals. The rest of them didn't. You don't want to be me, right? You want to do better and actually plan your way out so that when you get there, it's just more like plugging pieces into a puzzle instead of having all these pieces and having to like, okay, let's reorganize everybody. There's a lot more friction when you do it that way.
Totally.
Ray, just to go back to your comment about, if you're not embarrassed that first version, you waited too long. Tell us about what Podcast Talk looked like as an MVP.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue, I like the Google model. If you guys remember, Google search had the beta sign on it for like 25 years or something like that. So like Podcast Talk, if you go there, we launched about 2 years ago now. I still have the beta sign on there, right? Because I'm like, hey, if there's any bugs, it's still in beta. You kind of always have that to fall back on. So the first version of Podcast Talk was quite embarrassing. Again, I come from a software engineer background, and I'm like, I would have been fired from my jobs if that would have been the product that I had actually launched. But one of the things you have to keep in mind if you're bootstrapping your business. Now, if you're a VC and somebody give you $10 million, yeah, your first version can be very pretty, right? But most of us mere mortals who don't have $10 million in the bank account. I bought the first theme off of themeforest.net for $45. I mean, that was pretty much what it looked like. So it didn't look awful, but it is what it is. The first version we had allowed you to search the database and just download the contact information. So none of that email functionality was built in there. The searches were very buggy. I mean, some of those, if you combine certain criteria, the search you got back was like off. Slower than I'd like, not ridiculous, but took like 3 or 4 seconds because I'm a programmer, but I'm not a database guy. And we have, 2 million podcasts in there, 60 million podcast episodes. Yeah, that's a lot harder to search than, on my other business where we might have 10,000 records and you have to search. It might take a second or two. Run that same thing on 60 million records. You hit search and you go and get a coffee, come back, finish your coffee, and then maybe the results will be waiting for you when you're there. So that's the version we started out at. The way I worked around it is the pricing model that we use is at the beginning, I gave a really low price, gave you every feature that we had. So essentially premium membership for a really low price with the idea that that you're going to lock in this price for the rest of your life. But there are a lot of bugs right now. So you're putting up with that. The reason I did that was, again, I'm bootstrapping. So I'd rather have some people at least offsetting some of my costs instead of me just kind of paying everything out of pocket myself. And that's kind of how we built it up. And some of those users, our LTV is great because once, we're still in that phase where we're giving prices and we're raising prices every 6 to 12 months because we're adding new features and all the rest of it. And we're not at the final product that I had in my head yet. Hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be kind of 90% of the way there. And it has worked out pretty well for us. It offsets the cost. It helps us grow. We haven't needed to go and get money, even though we might be going out for a Series A right now, because we've proven the model, right? For anybody who's trying to raise funds, it's a lot easier to raise funds when you say, look, I already have customers and money coming in. Then here's my idea. Give me money. Ideas are easy. If anybody here wants it, I have a list of about 200 business ideas on a notepad. I'm happy to share it. Each one will take 5 to 10 years to build. So it's about 2,000 years worth of ideas. I'm not going to do half of them. Doing it is the hard part, right?
100%. Still, so much to unpack there. But where I'm going to go is market validation, right? I think every founder is in that stage where they're trying to figure out whether the product's viable and they're spending time and money on it. How long did it take you to get to some point that you felt validated about the product? And prior to that, did you have moments of saying, okay, is this worth my time?
I'll answer the questions in reverse order. So the first one is no. I never got to a point where is this worth my time because of kind of the way that I come around business ideas. I believe there are 2 kinds of business entrepreneurs out there, right? They're the visionary entrepreneurs. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, those who create things that we didn't even know we wanted, right? Nobody was looking for an iPhone. And then it's like, oh, let's meet that need. I'm not that. I'm definitely not those kind of entrepreneurs. I'm more the kind of entrepreneurs like, look, I need something. Let me go look for it. Nobody's doing it, or they're not doing it very well. So I'm like, I might as well build it myself. And those kind of ideas are generally considerably easier to validate, unless your idea is way out there. Like, I need a car with 5 wheels. I'm like, probably nobody else needs that. But this kind of thing, I just had to, I'm in a number of networks with entrepreneurs, and I mentioned like, hey, would you guys be interested in this? Just the easy validation was nobody I told this to up till now has said, no, I would not pay for this, especially since I'm bootstrapping at our price point. Like literally at our lowest price point, you get on about 1 show a week for $39 a month. And everybody's like, are you an author? Are you an entrepreneur? Are you a coach? Would you pay $39 to get in front of like a show every week? Would that be worth your time? And nobody's saying, no, I would never pay that. Everybody said yes. So the first version I actually came up with is I built the database. And I'm like, would anybody like to pay me to build, to search there? And I'll just give you a data load of 1,000 podcasts for you to do it for like $100. Everybody I reached out to said yes. And so I, not huge, but I did about 50 sales there just within my network. This wasn't publicized. No Facebook ads, nothing. Like to a T, almost everybody said yes there. At that point, I'm like, I got something. I'm like, everybody does it. There's nothing like this that's out there on the market. We can go in there. We can disrupt. And I'll be honest, since I don't have VC money, private equity, or anything behind me, if this only becomes like a $2 or $3 million SaaS product, and anybody in SaaS knows, I have a small team, 9 people. I don't see any reason to grow, maybe 1 or 2 more customer service. I'll have a 70% profit margin. It's a sole proprietorship. At $2 or $3 million, I'll be fine. I'll be able to pay my rent every month, kind of thing, right? And if somebody comes and right now with the multipliers on gross that they're giving for SaaS products of like 10 to 20x, then we're done as well. It is. I'll be honest. This is an exit play for me. So it's like I'm trying to do it for 5 years, get it up to about 5 million, and then exit. If somebody else wants to take it to 100, that's fine. But you're talking to me in Mexico right now, right? My wife's Mexican. My cost of living is nothing. Right. So if I could make, a $20, $30 million exit, I'll never have to worry about it.
Well, the other point that I heard there, and again, what I was trying to bring up is a lot of entrepreneurs, founders are looking for that market validation to like give them that confidence. Right. And what I heard from you is that you weren't trying to do that on some big vision, big product. You literally were taking this data and saying, I am now learning that people are willing to pay for this. And then once you did that, you're building around that core concept.
Absolutely. And then it's all about getting user feedback, right? So we have other features that we're building in there. We're getting, right now it's to get you booked on podcasts. We're actually getting podcast advertising information as well, because people are like, can I use this to find podcasts to sponsor? Right now, there is no database in the world where, let's say I want to pay $100 for a mid-roll on a marketing podcast. Can you let me know which podcasts are $100 for a mid-roll? Nothing. So we're reaching out to them. I now have the cleanest database of podcast content information in the world. So I can reach out to every single podcast in the world, have my team go in there and like when people answer with their media kits and everything, we're just going to manually enter it. It's a very, very tedious process. So there's a big barrier to entry in this because it's a data play and it's a manual data play. But once we get that in place, everybody will be able to go in there and find podcasts with 1 click to sponsor, to be a guest on, to sponsor, to all the data that you could possibly want to do. What we're looking to do is build a marketing tool. We want to make podcasts a marketing channel, which they kind of are, but most people look at it as marketing channel where you create your own podcast and that's the marketing channel. As somebody who's failed 3 podcasts, I can tell you and you guys know this, podcasting is not as easy as those courses make it out to be. Buy a $50 mic and you're a podcaster.
Right.
Yeah, no. There's quite a bit more to being a podcaster than that. I tried 3 times. My last one worked out, but it's because I hacked the system. But the first 2 were utter bombs. And I was like, it's much easier being on somebody else's podcast. You talk about what you're passionate about. They do the editing. They do the social media. You get a backlink for SEO to your website, especially on some websites with high domain authority. It's an SEO play. And the last thing that I found out, it's a great play for self-discovery because you get asked the same question many times. So like, Tony, Andy, if somebody asks you, tell me about yourself. The first time you answer that question, I remember my answer was all over the place. Like, well, I kind of did this, kind of did this. I've been on 200 shows now. And now when you ask me, tell me about yourself, boom, 30 seconds, I got it down verbatim. I know the answer. And it's kind of an honest answer. It's that old analogy of, there's a stone and there's a statue in there somewhere. My first answer was the stone. Now I've just kind of chipped away at the kind of peripheral stuff. And I actually know myself a little bit better for having done this, having answered that question publicly so many times.
I do love that idea real quickly of perfecting the pitch. Part of whether you're a founder and you're trying to raise capital, you're trying to sell, you're trying to convince employees to come on to a, startup business, is having that, identification of who you are, why you're in the world, what you're doing. And I love this idea that these podcasts, whether they have big reach or not, are your opportunity to hone that message and pitch.
Absolutely.
Ray, just to back up a little bit, you mentioned that, you foresee, I think you said in this year, that like getting the product to like 90% of like your vision. How did you achieve that? Like, what did that vision look like? And how did you build out those iterative steps to grow and get, 90%, that's pretty awesome. So I would love to hear a little bit.
Yeah, great question. And the answer is a little bit of a cop-out, but it's because my vision is very simple. It's a lot of people when they want to build SaaS products, and as somebody was involved, and I worked in Silicon Valley as a computer programmer. I saw scope creep. There you go. That's a tongue twister. Scope creep is very real, right? Because everybody wants that every bell and whistle they have on top of it. Mm-hmm. You guys know this. People pay for probably only 10% of what most of the products out there do, right? If you had just done that 10%, you would have had 90% of your customers without 90% of the headache, right? Because you're supporting all these weird features that only a small subset of your customers actually do. The beauty of Podcast Talk is it is so simple. We have the search engine on the top of it, but really we are a data company. Like, our product is our data. So as long as we get the clean data, and once we have the cleanest data, which is why by the end of this year we should have it all done because we're manually cleaning it, the product on top is really simple. It's a search engine that helps you easily find podcasts with just simple Boolean logic, right? This and this and this and this, and give me all the results. And we send out emails. Email 1, email 2, email 3. That's it. There's almost nothing else that our system does. I don't have to worry about all these extra things that we have to add on top of the product. Sure, we're gonna have media kit, this automated media kit feature, so you can put in your name and we'll tell you every time your name appears in the podcast description. You can just validate, yes, that's me, and you'll have a public page on our website that says, you can use this your media kit. Here are all the shows that I've been on. Listen to my previous episodes. But from a programming point of view, that's actually a really easy feature for us to build, right? It's a read-only feature, and there's not too much for us to do. That's why we're going to be able to get to 90% by the end of the year. I consider that the data being clean, and everything else is just little bells and whistles we add on top based on the user base. But we want to do one thing. We want to be the best in the world at doing one thing and doing it really, really well.
I'm curious your perspective on, I would say in all the founders we've interviewed, it's a 50-50 mix between technical founders, folks that come in, they know a little bit of programming, or they're just, very much in that technical mind, and then folks that know no concept of it all, but they're still trying to build a SaaS product or a technical product. What is your viewpoint on coming to the plate with that background and knowledge versus not?
I respect people who come without that knowledge, because that would be really, really scary to me, right? I'm a computer programmer, so I wasn't like a systems administrator or anything like that. So I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. I have been in the online field for a long time, so I pay attention how websites work and all the rest of it. I've analyzed the UI, UX side of things. If you're coming in with just the concept, I would say try to find a technical co-founder, because you're going to waste a lot of money spending it on things that you don't even know. Even I'm not a server guy, so if you tell me, should you be using AWS versus a DigitalOcean droplet? I'm just like, I have to Google that, because I really don't know myself either. My technical team takes care of it. I know enough that they can't really just kind of do an end run on me and say, we need this. I'm like, no, that's silly. But at least I have that. If you don't, I would say if you don't, make sure you have a lot of money in your bank account, or you have a lot of money behind you, right? Because you're going to be spending a lot of money to learn this on the job. Can it be done? Absolutely. But it is a big hurdle for you to learn when you're coming in. So try to find a technical co-founder, if at all possible. I don't have anything to back this up. You guys might know a little bit more, but I've heard that like many VC and PE funds will not even look at you if there's not at least one technical co-founder on your team if you're launching a SaaS product, because the risk is just simply too high for them to invest without there being somebody technical on your team to kind of offset that risk a little bit. I haven't looked into it, but I've had multiple people tell me that.
So what, you came in with the technical background. What gap did you potentially have in the beginning, and was like the first thing that like, hey, I got to find someone to help me fill this gap?
Yeah, so for me, the gap was a time thing more than a knowledge thing. So as I mentioned, to me, the two big things with a product is building it and selling it, right? There are operations and everything in between, but generally those are the two steps you need. Luckily, since I bootstrapped my first company 15 years ago, I exited that one in 2012. Since I only had $2,000 in the bank account, I had just left the Peace Corps, and that was like the only money I had. I had to learn marketing. So I taught myself SEO back in the day, where SEO was a whole lot easier than it is right now. I mean, back then there were like softwares that would spin articles and would auto comment on blog posts and all that kind of stuff. So I've been, and I even started doing SEO consulting for about 5 or 6 years. So I've been doing, I'm old by SEO standards. 15 years of doing SEO, that makes me pretty old. So I'm pretty good at marketing. I mean, I know Facebook ads pretty well. I know Google ads, like online marketing. If you ask me to hire, rent out a billboard on the side of a highway, I have no idea how to do that. But on online marketing, I'm pretty good. And I'm pretty technical. So theoretically, I could have done this all myself. The problem is I have another company to run. I have a 2-year-old that's running around, in the other room. I simply did not have the time. So when that happens, if you are in a position where you know multiple things in your company, try to avoid the no one can do it as well as me trap, right? I'm the founder. I need to do everything. You will never get past a certain point in your business. That'll get you from 0 to 7 figures. And I'm just barely 7 figures. It will not get you to multi-7. Forget about getting you to 8, right? So you need to kind of put your ego to the side a little bit and then examine where everything is, who's available in your network to kind of compensate for some of these things, make up some of the time, and bring them into the company. For me, in the case of Podcast Talk, I luckily knew somebody who helped take Zendesk from 0 to 30,000 users. And he's come in as my partner and my CMO on this. Do I know marketing? Absolutely. Do I have time to be doing it full time all day, every day when I'm also doing the technical side and running another company? Absolutely not. So it was kind of recognizing that weakness or that lack of resource in myself in order to bring people into the company.
Something I've asked a number of founders is, I know there's no silver bullet, right? But we're talking to other founders that are trying to grow business. Is there any 1 or 2 things that you felt were like big catalysts for growth that like kind of took that trajectory from this to this, right? Anything in your path that you've seen in either of your businesses that helped be that catalyst?
Yeah, so unfortunately in my other business, LiveLingua, no, we've just done 20% growth for 15 years straight, and that actually gets you to a decent size, right? I remember the first time we were featured in Forbes. I was like, this is going to be it. We're going to be huge. Yeah, nothing. Crickets. I mean, maybe there was a little spike in traffic for like the day the article went live, but after that, it never grew the business. Now, Podcast Talk, on the other hand, we have actually gotten lucky. So we've gotten some exposure. I started networking about 5 years ago, and I remember the first 4 years, I'm like, this whole networking thing, I don't get it. Like, nothing really is coming. Yeah, it's one of those hockey stick things, right? You just kind of reach a point, and suddenly enough people that you can actually start pulling some levers that otherwise you didn't have. That's what happened at Podcast Talk. So with Podcast Talk, I knew some people who introduced me some other ones. And for example, as a result, we were able to get Pat Flynn, those who listen to here, as an advisor on our company. And I was, on his show recently, and my episode with his went live about a month ago. He introduced me to John Lee Dumas. That episode is going live next week. These kind of things, essentially it's influencer marketing for us within the podcasting space. Again, it's relatively new. Most people have, everybody tries to get on the big podcasting, but it's an overall strategy that you follow week after week. It's a relatively new concept. People, it's like going on Instagram, going on all the rest of it. That has actually helped our growth a lot. You get on the right show in front of the right audience, and your business can take off. The example I always give is for the first 100 users, I onboarded every single one onto Podcast Talk. One of the ladies that came on there, she was a burlesque dancer. And I was like, wow. She's like, are there any podcasts on burlesque dancing? I'm like, honestly, I have never run that search before. Let's do it together, because I'm like, it's not something we did. There are about 200 shows on burlesque dancing in the world. Not that many by podcast, but still 200 shows. That's pretty good. Yeah. So I onboarded her. She started 6 months later. She sent me an email. She's like, oh, this is awesome. I have been on about half the podcasts about burlesque dancing in the world, and I have more leads right now than I know what to do with. Very niche market. But if you get on the shows, every show in your market, and people hear you everywhere. It doesn't matter which show they listen to, no matter how small it is. You've just become an authority, the go-to person, the coach, the SaaS product. If you're selling, a friend of mine does SaaS products for hockey leagues, high school hockey leagues, right? You get on every high school like sports podcast out there, you will be the software that everybody goes to for that, and your business will grow immensely within your market. So that's what's worked really well for us.
So Ray, what does with that, where you guys are at right now, getting to that 90%, does that change anything for the future beyond the current vision of the platform? I know you said simplicity is kind of key to it all, but what are the plans beyond that?
So the plans beyond that, as I mentioned, I might actually be looking to raise seed or Series A funds after that for two reasons. To accelerate the growth, of course, which is the main reason you raise seed. Well, some people use it to build a business, but we'll already have a profitable business before I go into that space. Next one is to accelerate it and kind of get market dominance with what we do, because the long-term vision, if we can get to where I want to be and become the number one company for people to get booked on podcasts in the world. So not only individuals, but agencies use us for their clients. I want to build the Ahrefs or SEMrush for podcasts. That is the next phase of what we're building. If you have your own podcast, if you want to market on every data that there is to do with podcasts, because we're already aggregating data from social media. We're aggregating data from, again, SEO, backlinks. We'll have all the backlinks to your podcast page. In ours, nobody else will have that. We want to become the Ahrefs SEMrush of podcasts.
Pretty interesting. So talk a little bit more about that product roadmap, because you mentioned it, is that every founder has a big vision. There's a lot of features. You talk to customers, your friends and family give you ideas. As soon as I hear this, I'm like, hey, Ray, I've got, 10 ideas for what you could do with your software. Let me tell you about them, right? How do you manage all of those ideas and turn it into a roadmap that's right for your business?
That depends, again, on the phase of the business you're at, right? If you're starting off, I would say for the most part, before you get your MVP out, ignore those ideas for the most part, right? Get out your MVP, then see what people really do, because what people say and what people do, until they pull out their wallet, everything they say is like, oh, it'd be great if you could do this. Would you pay me $100 for it? I'm like, no, I never pay you $100 for it. They're like, no, then I'm not going to do that. Right. So you need to kind of keep your vision, keep it simple too. Remember, get that. Let's go back to if you're not embarrassed by the first version of you launch, you will be embarrassed. Just launch it out there, throw it out there, see what people say. Then when you start getting feedback, document. So if 100, let's say you have 100 customers and 90 of them are asking for something, then you might be onto something. The challenge that I see a lot of founders fall into is people give them feedback, and the ones they remember are the ones that are the most interesting to them. Not necessarily the ones that they're hearing the most. You're like, ooh, that sounds cool. I'm going to build that, even though most people were asking for something else. So I actually have a document. Even in our system, we have one of those voting systems where everybody gets one vote, and they get to pick the next feature
I love those systems.
Yeah, it's the simplest one there, right? We are not, at this point, we're not even deciding what our next feature is. They're doing it. You can write something new if it's not already there, and everybody gets to vote. And that's essentially, that just gets imported. Once it gets approved by me, just gets imported into our project management system. That's what we're building next. And we just add that into the system. So essentially, we are going to, right now, the product roadmap is we built what our users are asking for. It's past the point of view in my vision. My ego is put to the side. My vision is having a company that works for the most amount of people and helps get messages out there, right? That's what we do as a podcast guest kind of software. I want to help people with these amazing stories and messages get connected to great podcasts so they can share their stories and messages. We even give, if you're a charity, I'll mention it right now if you guys don't mind, we'll give you a free account, absolutely free. We will not charge you a message, because if you're doing something to make the world a better place, you do not have to pay us. Let us know. We'll give you a free account for life so you can get the message out there. And if, we want to build a software and a SaaS product that helps the most amount of people do that and make a living along the way.
What's been your best way to get that customer feedback? Because we've talked about that a lot on the show, and I've met a lot of founders. Some of them are great at, right? They're great at going and talking to people and asking the right questions. And there's other founders that are maybe more on the technical side, other things that they struggle to really, have that gumption to go out and ask the right questions. How have you talked to customers, and what have you found the best ways to do it?
Yeah, so the best hack that I've come up with in all these years, and I do this both at Live Lingua and at Podcast Talk, is and I put that between air quotes for those who are listening to it, send a personal email to everybody who signs up that looks like a personal email from me, not, with a perfect formatting. It looks like it comes from like a Gmail account. We even personalized it a little bit. So, it would say, hey, Andy, I hope all's going well in Chicago or wherever you're at right now. My name's Ray. I'm the founder of this company. I just want to know, why do you decide to sign up with us? And, what could we do to make our product better? Looks like a real email. I get about a 20% response rate to that. Risk. They now have my personal email because it is really my email. If they reply, that comes to me. And if there's a complaint in the future, I get an email about it. But especially when you're starting off, that has worked wonders for me because now everybody knows me, has my personal email, and they feel comfortable coming to me with their complaints. And while I don't like hearing their complaints, that's what I need to hear to make it a better product.
Just getting on that a little bit, I think the other thing I've seen with founders is this idea of, are you in your own head and you see your vision and you're locked into it versus hearing what other people are saying and having openness to change and ideas. What do you think that right balance is potentially, even if there isn't a right balance of, sticking to the vision, knowing who you are, what you want to accomplish, and then having that ability to adjust, pivot, or just hear other ideas?
Yeah. So another great question. One of the things that I see, especially when I speak at conference for the first-time founders, especially, right? They get, emotionally attached to their business, right? This is my baby. This is my life. I've launched dozens of businesses. None of these are my babies anymore, right? I am building a solution to a problem that's out there. I want to build the best hammer to hammer nails, right? That's kind of it. So I'm not emotionally tied to what my hammer looks like. Is it pretty? Is it ugly? It needs to get the job done. And that's my recommendation for the balance. The vision for me is as you said, what you're trying to accomplish. We're trying to connect great guests with great podcasts. It's that simple. Everything else around it is just extra kind of frosting on the cake. And I don't care if the way the cake looks at the end is not the way I wanted the cake to look like. I wanted a white one with, flowers on top, but we end up with a blue one with, balloons coming out of it. I'm like, I don't really care because the cake is good. It does what it needs to do. Emotionally separate yourself from the business. You'll make much better decisions about your business. If you're not personally insulted every time somebody tells you your software is awful and doesn't work for them, a lot of people do. I've even seen some people kind of give angry emails back. You don't fight with your customers who are saying, oh, it didn't work. You're like, no, you're an idiot. You weren't using it right. That is never the right answer. Take it, say sorry. If you're a SaaS product, give them 3 months free. It's not going to cost you a penny. And just say, take their feedback to heart, because if they came to you, if they're mad enough to come to you, that means there's probably 100 other users who are having the same problem who just never bothered to come to you, right? They just never got to that level out there. So fix it and you'll have a lot more happy customers out there.
Gave me the title for my next book, The Business Baby Problem.
There you go. Hey, a little crying entrepreneur on the cover. I'd buy that.
I'm going to put Tony in a diaper. He's going to be on the front of the book.
Sounds like an exciting photo shoot. So Ray, to shift gears a little bit, being a founder involved in, a couple businesses, you're a busy guy, probably wearing a ton of hats. How do you organize your days, weeks? How do you do the time management, productivity, focus on objectives, and prioritization? How does Ray manage all this?
I actually have a detailed system where I might actually be writing a book soon on it, because I thought everybody did this until recently, and I started showing people the system I use. So I actually spend a lot of time management. And when I came up with this the first time, I spent 6 months actually coming up with the system. And now I do it every 6 months to do it. So basically what I do is I track down where I spend all my time every 3 months. So I go through a week and I track all my time. And then I kind of optimize it based on 4 categories in life, which is work, family, hobbies, and health. And I kind of break down, I see how much time I'm spending on all of those. I also actually, as part of the exercise, in each one of those categories, you write the title of the book that would be written about your life at the end of your life, right? So you kind of go in there. So that kind of, it gets you thinking about how do you want people to remember you when you're there. The next step is you actually write the back cover of that book. So you say, Tony is this right now. He went through this transformation, and at the end of the life, this is what he had. Then you work backwards. So, I'm 40, so I plan on living to 100. So, I'm not going to say where I'm not going to be planning year to year all the way up to 100, but I do it by decades until I get to about 5 years. And then I broke it down into, 3-year plan, 1-year plan at that point. And then you see it, because I broke down my week by how many hours I have. I actually know how many hours I have free, and I can actually allocate that to whatever my priority is right now in life. And that changes. When my son was born, obviously, family priority went way up, and I had to spend more time on that, which means I had to sacrifice some of this time I might have spent on work. Health, I never sacrificed, because that's the kind of core. If you're unhealthy, it doesn't matter how your business is doing, how your family's doing, all the rest of it, right? You need to kind of keep that in place. The one that suffers, unfortunately, generally is my hobbies, because I do have hobbies. And that's usually the first one I have to kind of give up when I'm trying to focus on kind of short-term goals. So that's my entire process for doing it. So the basic idea is, hopefully I'll write it out on my personal blog in the next few months. But the first step to do that just worked for me, I just did it with my wife, is write down all the hours you spend every week and see how you can optimize that. There's certain things like my learning time. I'd have learning time and I'd have to commute, take my son to school and take him back. Listen to audiobooks on the way to work. Suddenly I save 2.5 hours a week. I kind of go through that, and I was able to save, in my case, I found out I had 5 hours free, but I was able to take it up to 18 by doing this exercise just a month ago. My wife didn't. She got 25 hours back every week of her time, because she found out, like, wow, I don't need this many meetings, and I don't need to be doing this, and I can get somebody else to do this for me, all that kind of stuff. We just never sit down and even think about it. All it takes is just write it out on a list, and you will see, label the ones that you can't change, like sleep. You're like, nope, I'm going to sleep 1 hour. That's probably not a possibility, right? I need to eat. I need to take a shower, all those kind of things. But do a huge amount of detail, and you will find you're probably wasting a lot more time than you think every week. And if you can just get 4 or 5 hours more free every week to spend on your business, to spend on your health, to spend on something else, your life could be, you change your life.
I always enjoyed, years ago, I did an exercise. You kind of draw a circle and you create these different parts of the pie chart, and you have so many bars in each one. And it's like, family, friends, hobbies, spouse, kids, health, business, wealth. Which ones are you going to fill bars in? Because you only have so many.
Nobody bothers to do that, right? We all think we have much more time in the day than we do, so we try to do it all.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who said the quote, but one of my favorite quotes is, "You can do everything you want in your life. You just can't do it all at the same time," right? And that's the thing. We all try to do it at the same time. We try to focus on our families, focus on our jobs, focus on our health, and have a hobby that we do all at exactly the same time. And you're never going to be able to do that, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You need to focus on 1 or 2 of those things for now, so you can get the rewards and focus on some of the other ones later on down the road.
Really helped me understand what I found important. I'll be completely transparent. My friend's bar was like 0 because I have 2 kids. I have a business, health. I mean,
all my friends are entrepreneurs, because I can squeeze them into the business part, and we're like, there we go. Yeah.
That's the way to do it, is try and combine columns.
That's it. Yep.
So talk about the future of the business, and you were talking a little bit about raising capital and bootstrapping. I always am a big believer in the advice that, get some revenue, get some customers before you go out and raise capital. Mm-hmm. What's your one mindset on that? And 2, have you gotten into the process of raising capital? Because that's always such a big, daunting thing for founders. The time, effort, everything that goes into trying to pull in money. What's kind of your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I'm actually very much in the early phases of doing this. There are a few things that kind of, I think, make it easier for me than for other people. One of the beauties of doing raising capital for a business that's already making money is I don't need the money. Right? I'm not going and begging for money, because my company, I don't have like a 6-month runway, a 12-month runway. I have a 10-year, my runway is as long as I want to make it, because it's making money, right? I mean, the capital is for growth. It's not for survival. And that's the treadmill a lot of people get on there, because they hire with the expectation of future growth, and the growth doesn't come, and suddenly, wait, my burn rate is much higher than my actual income. So that's part of what makes it a little easier for me. The second thing is, since I've been in the game for 14 years now without ever raising capital, I know VC people and PE people that they're actually friends of mine that I've never actually tried to. There have been multiple times where people have said, "I'll give you money," and I'm like, "No, that's fine, that's fine." So I'm in a slightly different place when it comes to that. That being said, when I'm raising capital, I know what my requirements are. So step number one is I don't really need it. So if you're not going to meet my requirements as an investor, I don't care if you give me the money, I'm not going to take it, because I'm not willing to kind of compromise on these certain things. For me personally, the certain things is all my companies are virtual. So if you expect me to rent out an office building, live in a certain place, and do all the rest of it, I'm like, yeah, I'm not taking your money. I'm looking people to invest for the mid to long term. So if you're like, okay, 2 years, we need an exit, you need to have 20% growth month on month. That's not necessarily the kind of person I'm looking for as well. I want to get this to $5 to $10 million, have an exit. The investment amount I want is going to, I'd say, let's say 10 to 20% of the company, kind of based on the future sale values, what I would raise. You're not going to be a majority owner. So if you're coming in here and you want a majority of the company, then you're not getting that either. We can talk about, what kind of stocks we have and all the rest, because I registered as C Corp, so I do have multiple stock options for you there. But I'm going into it with that mindset that I am looking for investors who are looking for the same thing I am. And if you're not that kind of investor, then I'm not interested. And I would recommend that to anybody who's trying to raise capital. Try to get into that position before you're raising capital, because otherwise, these VCs, they do this for a living. If you think you're going to outsmart them by kind of going in there and saying, no, I'm going to get what I want, you're not going to get what you want, I hate to disappoint you. No way. They have way more lawyers than you. They have done thousands of these deals. You are not going to get, a disproportionately good deal out of any VC, any reliable VC out there. So, but if you go in there with your expectations, you say at the beginning, you might actually have a slightly lower, higher turndown rate, but the person you get to invest with you in the long term will probably be a better fit for your company culture and your vision. And you will you'll sleep better at night, because you don't have somebody who's trying to do something different from you, kind of breathing down your neck every month, to try to make you move in a direction that you don't want to do. Like you said, I have a 2-year-old. I'm going to spend time with my 2-year-old. I'm not at the age where I'm going to be like working 18 hours a day and sleeping in the office and all the rest of it. If that's what you expect, don't invest with me. I'm investing my track record. I've had multiple exits and multiple successful businesses. I've never had VC money before, but I know what to do and I know how to make it work. So that's kind of the position you should be in when you're investing. Anything else, bootstrap it until that point would be my advice.
I love that approach, because you're basically putting yourself in a power of strength. And the whole dynamic starts out from a completely different standpoint. So rather than being there, with neediness, you're choosing them as much as they're choosing you. And
exactly.
I'm sure, even though that is by design and that's how it's working for you, that's probably something to learn for a lot of people that are out there trying to raise funds.
And I think VCs, they can sense that. If you need them badly, they're like, ooh, we could, we're getting another 10% of this company out. Maybe I would have invested for 20% before, but now that I see how desperate it is, I want 40% of the company, because I know he'll say yes. Yeah, exactly.
You're too desperate. It's hard to get.
It's like going on a date, right? If you're dating, you're desperate, they're like, yeah, they'll totally, walk all over you, right?
Yeah.
A lot of our founders talk about mentors and networks and groups that they're part of. I've had mentors. I've been a mentor, part of lots of groups. Talk to me about who you bring into your life to help you be a better entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the keys to growth, especially once you get past the startup phase, right? How would I put it? I'm an introvert, believe it or not. Nobody who's ever met me in a conference will ever say that, but one of those after 2 days of conference, don't talk to me for a week. I just need a good book and just lock myself in my room. So I went to my first conference about 5 years ago. So I had been running businesses for about 8 years before I actually met another entrepreneur. I'm like, I never actually started doing these things before. But I also point that as the point where my business growth kind of doubled and tripled, because I started talking to other entrepreneurs, learning from them, and networking. So I started in one group, and every 2 or 3 years, depending on the kind of entrepreneur you are, I'm still friends with the people in the group I started out with. But the strange thing happens is not every entrepreneur out there that you're going to meet is going to have this growth mindset. So I met, the people, the first group I was in, I was kind of the right level for them when I got there. But after 2 or 3 years of going to the events, I found that the people who were there 2 or 3 years ago were at the same level. Well, my business has grown and I'd learned more. So I found another group for the next level. And after that, you kind of grow past that group and you grow into the next one. Again, not everybody grows, or people are happy where they're at. If your goal is to have a lifestyle business of $100,000 a year and travel around the world, more power to you. But that's not what I want. So I was in the group like that, and then I kind of moved past it to the next group. Once you get to about 7 figures, that's when I personally kind of started the mentoring stuff. I would have started earlier if I knew how amazing it was. Not mentoring and coaching. So a lot of 2 different things. So the mentoring was on the business side, but I actually did a lot of mindset work as well as I was growing. And I think that was key to my growth when we were doing it. And now, I have the privilege of being part of numerous groups with people with 9-figure businesses. I'm a big proponent of be the dumbest person in the room. And trust me, when I go to these conferences, within the business context, some of those conversations are way over my head. Not to name drop too much, but because of networking, I got invited out to Necker Island about 12 weeks ago, maybe 16 weeks ago. So those of you who don't know it, that's Richard Branson's private island. So the story I tell is the first night we were there, about 25 entrepreneurs were there. It was part of this charity event. And we were all talking, and Richard kind of walks in the room. The whole room goes hush, and then we'll all pretend he's not there, right? Just kind of go back to our conversation. The volume goes back up. He invites us out to dinner. And he's got this the longest one-piece wood table I've ever seen in my life. He looked like a sequoia tree, and he must have made a table out of it. Like most of us mere mortals have 5 tables we put together to make a long table. Not him. Big long one. So I decided there's so many interesting people here. I'm going to sit in the middle of the table. So somebody can be on my left, somebody can be on my right, somebody can be in front. I can talk to all these people. So I sit down, I start talking to the person on my left. Fascinating conversation. And then I kind of turn in front of me, and it didn't even occur to me that Richard Branson would sit right in front of me. So I'm sitting right across the table from Richard Branson. On his left is President Sirleaf, the first female president of Africa. And on his right was Dr. Astro Teller, who's the head of Google X. And, essentially X is the moonshot factory of Google. So the smartest people in Google work there, and he's the smartest person in the smartest part of that. We do small talk, and eventually they just start talking about things that are way beyond, not that I don't understand them, just the way that they look at the world. They're talking about ending world wars and global hunger, right? I mean, just the things that they're thinking about is amazing. That's what networking in new groups can do. I was by far, the least experienced in life and dumbest person in that group, but I was so inspired. Again, I understood what they were saying. I just don't think the way you do. I can learn to think the way you do. It's just I don't dare, I guess would be the best word. How many of us dare to think we can let's end global hunger next year? We're all thinking about growing our businesses 10 and 20%. Why aren't we thinking about growing our businesses 10x or 100x in the next year? That's what those level of people think about. And that's what networking, mentorship, coaching kind of shifts your mind to start thinking about the world in a different way, as opposed to what we learned in school, which was gradual incremental growth in our businesses. I don't have the answer to how to do that yet, but at least I'm looking for it now. And that is kind of the biggest thing that networking has taught me.
That's great.
Really
Any groups that you recommend out there for folks to get involved with?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the level in your journey you're at and what your goals are, right? So I'm pretty active in a group called Dynamite Circle. That's kind of a digital nomad entrepreneur group, right? So generally you need at least $1,500,000 of income to make it into that one, but the biggest person there is a $100 million company. So that's a certain kind of mindset there. I'm part of another group called Mastermind Talks. It's invite only, about 150 people. And that group, you also need to have at least a 7-figure business to do it. I'm also a founding member in a group called M3. I just got back from Vegas where we were all dogfighting each other in planes together. It's called Experience-Based Networking. Everybody there has 7 or 8-figure businesses as well. You can apply, but it's generally invite only. So once you get to the kind of 7-figure level, you can do that. You can also go to YEC and EO. Those are all over. These are much more well-known groups that you can join. EO is a little, or YEC is a little easier to get into. EO is a little higher level, but apply. The network, the people you meet there can change your life. A lot of them are more traditional businesses. So I was in YEC for a while, but they're more kind of brick and mortar, and it's great people, but it's not really kind of my thing. I'm in the online space, and it wasn't that great a fit. But try them out. You can always leave them if they don't work out for you, but do it. Your business will grow as a result.
That's great.
Ray, that's awesome. Before we ask you, kind of last question that we wrap up all these conversations with, podcasttalk.com, that's where people can go to check it out. Where is a good place for people that want to follow your journey, pay attention to what you're up to? Is there a good spot?
Yeah, so I always joke that I'm busy building businesses, so I have never been really busy building my own personal brand, right? So if you go on Twitter and follow me, you'll be really bored because, I can't think of a smart thing to say every day on Twitter, right? So I'm working on the business. But if you want to follow me, old school, go to Facebook, add me on Facebook, look for rayblakeney.com, look for a picture of somebody sword fighting. We talked about hobbies. I'm a semi-professional sword fighter on the side. So that's where you'll find me. That's where you can kind of follow up, the shows I'm on, all the rest that are there, along with a few personal things that I do. Or you can go to my personal website, rayblakeney.com, RAYBLAKNEY.com. And that is where I'm starting a blog. I have some articles that are not quite published yet, but I'm trying to get about 12 articles ready before I do it. And I'm going to start publishing and writing more regularly on there so you can kind of keep up with what I'm doing. Also, if you want to have me on a podcast or speak at a conference, you can contact me through rayblakeney.com.
Fantastic.
So, question I ask every entrepreneur we talk to is, if you could go back in time before you started a business and have coffee with yourself, what advice would you give?
Oh, absolutely. Focus. Don't follow these other businesses. The example I'll give for Live Lingua. So we were online language lessons. We were an early mover. We did it about 14 years ago. We kind of went up to mid six figures pretty quickly. I'm like, I got this. And then I started building all these other businesses that didn't go anywhere. I spent the next 2 years doing that. That's it. Exactly. And in the meantime, big investors started coming around and building companies that did the same thing. So then I had to refocus on that. Now we had all this competition. And if I had focused on Live Lingua for those 2 or 3 years where I got distracted, we would have been so far ahead of the competition that nobody would have been able to catch up with us, like on the SEO and the ad and the growth side of things. But I did not. I got distracted, took my eye off the ball. And as a result, I have a successful business, but we do not dominate the market like we could have. For Podcast Talk, I'm trying not to do that. I'm going to focus on that. And this is what I'm doing for the next 5 years.
Great. Awesome.
That's fantastic, Ray. Well, I want to say thank you so much. This has been outstanding. Really great conversation, great insights. For everyone tuning in, check out podcasttalk.com. Really cool stuff. We will have another exciting founder on again. Thank you for joining, and we really appreciate your time here today.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It was a blast.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ray. I'll be signing up for Podcast Hawk myself. Don't worry.
Awesome.
Take care, everybody.